Where do fingers grow?
Where?
On palm trees. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage, a mostly fantasy football podcast. I am your host, Brandon Carney, alongside my esteemed co-host, Pat Gustafson. We've got some NBA stuff to talk about. We've got some fantasy football stuff to talk about. Again, that is usually what most of our show is about. And today we've got the AFC South fantasy football preview coming up here in a little bit. Hey, listen. There's some gems in the South. There is a lot of ass, but there is also the one, the only, Bay Show Tootin'. So we will get to that when we get to it. But first things first, Pat, we have a little bit of an announcement for the viewers, for the listeners. Now, we have been talking about possibly doing a viewer or a listener league, fantasy league with some of our most dedicated, followers, supporters, and we have decided to do exactly that, but with a little twist. Pat, you want to take the people through it?
Yeah, so what we are doing here, this is not your normal fantasy football league. This is referred to as a vampire or a graveyard league. We're calling it vampire for the sake because I want to suck your blood. That's why we're doing that. Sorry about that. So pretty much how this works is it is a 10-team league. That is a recommended number for a vampire league. We'll be doing it on Sleeper. Brandon and I are going to co-own a team, and we're going to be the vampire. So the other 9 teams are going to draft. All is normal, everything. And then at the end, Brandon and I will make a team up of completely undrafted players. Entirely undrafted players. But the key here is we are the only ones that have access to free agency with a few exceptions throughout the whole year. And the reason why is to give them a fighting chance, to give us as the vampires a fighting chance. So it's pretty much best ball. You are going to want to draft the team that you hope doesn't get injured, you hope will be around, because you cannot make any, you can trade, but you cannot make any pickups throughout the league. And here's the key: when the vampire plays you, and when we beat you, we get to take any player from your team, no questions asked. You can't. The only difference is they have to be in your starting lineup. Someone from your starting lineup. So you could bench guys if you want to be a little strategic to avoid getting vampired. But either way, we're taking somebody from your lineup, whoever we want, and all we have to do in return is give you someone of the same position of our own choice.
And they will be ass.
And they will be Bayshaw too.
Hey, I said ass, not the goat. Hold on here.
So yeah, so you can stash guys on your bench to avoid losing them, but you still have to make a competitive lineup, unless you don't have enough guys. Trades are encouraged, even with the vampire. The vampire, we will have the biggest player pool available to us. So honestly, what I read is it's encouraged for people to try and make trades with the vampires. But besides that, it's a normal league, head-to-head matchups on a weekly basis. It's kind of just a matter of, does the vampire catch enough heat, enough steam to win enough games, get some good players, and be competitive. And once you hit the playoffs, it's a normal league. Everyone can pick up people in free agency. The vampire won't steal anyone from you if they beat you in the end, in the playoffs. So that's pretty much what we're doing here. I said to Brad, I'm like, I don't want to do a regular old league.
Yeah, we're in so many normal leagues as it is, and
this
doing
is the
something
perfect opportunity. Yeah,
doing something podcast based is a good opportunity to do something fun like this, and it gives us a more kind of unique thing to talk about each week and play along with you guys. And I mean, I'm just excited to be the vampire in a league like this, especially in a 10-teamer, Pat, because you and I we're so used to playing in 12-team leagues or even larger that I feel like I'm almost salivating at the idea of making an all-free agent team and a 10-teamer, because I'm like, we're going to be able to make a pretty good team. Off the rip, it's going to be obviously a lot worse than everyone else's, but it's still going to have, I think, decent enough players. And then once these other teams, start to get hit by injuries or whatever it is, and they can't pick anybody up to compensate, and they just have to go to their bench, whatever they've drafted. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us there, and it's going to be
just a matter of when can the Vampire start ripping off wins. If we can't start winning games until week 7, week 8, we're probably fucked. But if can we steal one within the first 3 weeks of the season to try to keep building the team? We talked about it last year how there wasn't a ton of waiver wire darlings like there was 2 years ago with Puka and Kyron Williams. So will that be the case again this year? This is a very interesting format. It will be through Sleeper, so you will need to have a Sleeper account. I saw as in the chat, yes, this is a listener league. And if you want in, you can DM me on Instagram at PJ Gustafson, because Bran is famous and probably has a lot of you in his DMs anyway, talking about absolute nonsense. So DM me.
I'll offer one other option. I do have an email for this podcast, actually. It's not brand coverage named, but it's just benchwarmerbrandpod@gmail.com if you want to email that. Either way, we will look at submissions on both of these things.
Yes, whichever one is more convenient for you in that situation. So basically, pretty much, obviously, just tell us why you want in the league. How long have you been a listener, and what is your favorite brand coverage bit or segment that we do, because God knows there are so goddamn many.
Numerous.
Like, if you bring up Bayshall Tootin', you know what we're talking about.
Oh,
and there will be a prize. We haven't determined quite yet what the prize will be, but if someone other than us wins this league, there will be a prize. And if we win, we I don't know.
You owe us a prize. You have to give us $100 each.
And speaking of which, this is completely free to enter. No money involved in it. This is just strictly fun for us to do with some listeners. So, and don't think this is going to be a first come, first serve kind of thing. Obviously, those of you watching now on YouTube, tune in on YouTube, by the way, 7:30 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday night. You guys can go do this now, as opposed to those of you, the many listeners on Spotify, Apple, wherever else you get your podcasts. May not be for a little while. So we're not just going to, we're going to give everybody a chance here to give everyone a chance here to try and get in this league here. We understand 9 is not a lot. There may be there may be a lot of you, so we will do our best to accommodate the goats. And if you don't get picked, it doesn't mean you're not one of the goats. It just means 9 people made me laugh harder on their.
That's fair. And I will say, too, if you're one of our dedicated YouTube listeners, chatters, whatever it may be, put whatever your username is from YouTube in that message, just so we know who you are. Because if we recognize you, if you're in the chat constantly, we will probably, give you a good chance of getting in the league here. So that's all I'll say there.
Absolutely.
But that'll do it for that, folks. Make sure you reach out, and if you want to get into the league, I think it'll be a good time. Pat, before we get into the fantasy football stuff and the AFC South, I actually am excited to talk about that division. Got some strong thoughts, but in both directions throughout that division. But first, we've got a bunch of NBA shit that we should at least touch on, because it's really the last major sports thing that's going to happen for a little while. We are officially in that dead period of MLB only, or at least we will be after the NBA draft goes through, which starts tomorrow night. The Thunder, Pat, are NBA champions in a pretty unfortunate way.
Man.
Look, they obviously could have, and maybe even would have, likely would have won that game regardless. But Tyrese Halliburton, who came out just extremely hot in that game, goes down with the torn Achilles early. One of my favorite players in the league, huge WWE fan, so a guy that I love watching, love his personality. Painful way to go out for him. And now that obviously muddies the Pacers' outlook here for next season, because Tyrese Halliburton, you would think, is going to miss the entire season. They'll be back, though, I'm sure. They have such a good talent core that I'm sure they'll be all right. As far as the Thunder, congratulations to them. Honestly, very impressed just overall by them. Look, this isn't a surprise, right? They were the number 1 seed in the West heading into the playoffs, but I think big picture, it is a bit of a surprise with just how young they are. And I tweeted this out the other day, it's crazy that they managed to win an NBA championship while holding on to their gaggle of first-round picks they have over the next 5 years, because a lot of people thought and assumed, I think rightfully so, that they were going to trade at least a couple of those for, a superstar to help get them over the hump, get Shea a real running mate, get them, or even get him somebody to that on paper surpassed him in stardom, whoever that player may have been. They didn't. They hung tight, and they won a championship with this young team, and now they have all these picks to do whatever they want with them in the next 5 years.
Yeah, just an absolute masterclass of roster rebuilding by this franchise to sell on Paul George when they did, knowing how desperate the Clippers were to get him in order to bring in Kawhi Leonard. The fact that you bring in Shea and all these first-round picks, and then to make an absolute slam dunk in Jalen Williams, what I believe is like the 13th pick, in 13th or 14th pick in his draft, a kid out of Santa Clara, for them to hit that hard on him, and obviously you're bad enough to get top picks and get Chet Holmgren there. And, you spend the money you do have on guys like Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, who were just perfect role players for this organization. Mark Dagano, UConn Husky alum. We got to shoehorn UConn at any chance we get.
Yep.
And it's also scary that they're going to get back a kid who probably would have been a top 5 pick in last year's draft had he not torn his ACL in Nikola Topic. They're just going to have him back as well. Basically another lottery pick. And they've got the 15th pick as well tomorrow night. So there's no sign of this team slowing down at all.
No.
But it's not one that gets you mad, though, because they're not just trading for guys and doing everything. They genuinely built a championship-winning organization from the ground up, and it took them a while, but they finally got it done, and kudos to them for that.
No, it's incredibly impressive. It's got to be super satisfying for their fans to go through a rebuild like this and then see it pay off at the end of it. It feels very, trust the process-y, except it actually, except it actually fucking worked out. So this is the good timeline for the 76ers if it went something like this. But yeah, shout out to the Thunder, NBA champion, 7th different champion in the last 7 years. The parity era is upon us, but the Thunder may very well win another one here in the next couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised.
I will say, I did want the Pacers to win because that would have just been the pluckiest, because I feel like Halliburton would have been the least superstar-y of superstars to lead their team. Like, you look at all these teams from the last few years, whether it's LeBron, KD, Curry, Jokic, Giannis. I'd say, like, the least starry guy was Kawhi. Fucking Kawhi Leonard, too, we're talking about. So, like, it would have been really cool to see them win on the power of friendship, pretty much. But again, that's just another organization that's done a great, getting Andrew Nembhard in the second round, getting Aaron Nesmith from, I don't know if they got him from the Celtics, but he didn't do much in Boston as a lottery pick. So again, another just really good building job. And they have the GOAT, TJ McConnell, as well. Someone's like, man, that white boy getting triple teamed in the finals. He all right? It's like, yeah, but no, it would have been fun to see. Sucks for Halliburton. I mean, that guy put that team on his absolute back, and it sucks to see him go down when the fruits of his labor could have paid off. But like I said, who knows? They could have easily done it. Thunder could have easily beaten him anyway.
Yeah, and we watched him go down over and over and over and over and over again. Thanks, ESPN, for all those replays. I really wanted to see that man's Achilles just fucking pop in Ultra HD 4K 1,000 straight times. So really appreciate you guys for that. Pat, the trades have just been ripping here in the NBA as well.
Even within the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know, within the last 10 minutes as well. The day of Game 7, Kevin Durant got traded to the Rockets in what I think was a great deal for the Rockets and a not so great deal for the Suns. Look, I understand there's not a lot of leverage there. KD's 37. You're not in a place where you're going to compete because that big three of KD, Beal, and Booker just wasn't going anywhere. But looking at the return of that they received, headlined by Jalen Green, who just has seemingly not developed at all in 4 years in the NBA. The 10th overall pick, I think, is probably the biggest asset in this trade. Dylan Brooks is a solid enough role player, but feels like a role player that should be on an actual contending team and would do better there, or would be better served there. So in Phoenix, I'm not really sure how well that works. And then 5 second-round picks, which just is hilarious.
Devontae Graham?
I don't know what the fuck is up with that. But I think for the Rockets, this makes them a contender here in the interim, because they've now got a nice little core there between KD, Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet. I think that is a nice little lineup there, and I'm excited to see what they can do next year.
And I think the biggest thing about this is people say, like, oh, you trade 2 starters, Fred VanVleet might leave, and free agency, they've just got Reed Shepard, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith
they
Jr.
kept all their
just
big,
ready
young,
to go.
yeah.
Shepard is going to slot right into that starting shooting guard role. Obviously, they didn't give him much of a chance because they didn't have to. Being such a deep team, they didn't have to give him a chance this year. But, hopefully they were developing him on the side. He can jump right in. Tari Eason's been one of the better mid-first round picks of the last few years. And Jabari Smith, a third overall pick as well. Like another team where it's just like, the sky is the limit for them, and you bring in someone like KD who could shoot, because they need someone who could shoot, because, God, Amen Thompson throws up absolute missiles. Him and his brother both shoot absolute bazookas when they're out there, so they really need a shooter. I'm disappointed. I thought he would have been a perfect Spur, but in terms of the Suns, they didn't have much they could do. I think this is just a case of them not trading him soon enough. This should have happened during the season last year. And I think they're not done. I don't think they're going to go into next year with the 3 shooting guard backcourt of just absolute hilarity. I don't know what they're going to do to get around it, but I don't even think it's necessarily this trade. I just think it just shows kind of the failure in general of what they tried to do the last few years here, and it's finally fully coming into fruition.
The Suns are in maybe the worst situation of any NBA team right now, and I don't think that's
Bulls.
I don't think that's much of an exaggeration, if at all, just with how stuck they are with very few assets and a completely uninspiring roster. So we'll see what they end up doing
Trade for
from here.
no trade clause, Bradley Beal. Give me a goddamn break.
Meanwhile, the Boston Celtics were at the center of the 2 other big trades that have happened the last couple days, and they seem to just be accepting their fate with this being a gap year while Jason Tatum recovers from a torn Achilles, because they are just shedding salary. They got rid of Drew Holiday and brought in Anthony Simmons, who is basically just tank commander extraordinaire. I mean, I think he's just going to be throwing up shots all day. He doesn't play a lick of defense, and it's just going to be one of those guys that, look, this is the last year of his deal as well for Simmons. So, or is it Simons? I don't know how it's pronounced.
But Simons.
Anthony Simons. This is the last year of his deal, so he'll be gone. He'll be gone the season after next when Tatum's ready to come back, so he won't really be a factor unless the Celtics were to extend him. And then the Celtics also got rid of Kristaps Porzingis in a 3-team deal, sending him to the Hawks. The other effect of this, and the Celtics really only brought back Georges Niang and a second-round pick out of that, which is
this was
fascinating.
a clear salary dump. I mean, they're below under the second apron now. Like, that's the problem in the NBA with how they pay their players, which is great the way they pay their players. It's like, you get a bunch of good guys, you have to extend them. Yeah. And then it just bubbles up. And
trust me, as a Nuggets fan, we're well aware. We are stuck.
With the Jaylen Brown contract, with the Tatum contract, I thought they might even try to trade Brown and get a huge return back. But I understand kind of trading these two a little second level pieces. Quite frankly, I've never even heard of Lativia. Who is this Tengus Pingus? I've never even heard of Lativia. That lives rent-free in my head every time I think about this guy. I don't know. Do we think he's even actually going to be a Hawk? Or do we think that they're going to try
I think
and
so.
flip him? Because, they've got Trae Young, they've got Risa Shea, they've got Jalen Johnson. Like, they've actually got some decent things to work with there.
I think this is a win now sort of acquisition for them. I think the emergence of especially Dyson Daniels last year as such an impact player has kind of put them on the radar as a team that can compete, especially, Pat, in an Eastern Conference that has been decimated by these injuries. Like, we're talking the Celtics where they got Porzingis from, but we're also talking the Pacers who are going to be without Tyrese Halliburton. We're talking the Bucks who are going to be without Damian Lillard, and for fuck's sake, might trade Giannis. I mean, I doubt it, but they could. So I think the Hawks are making the right move here, and they are honestly in as good of a position as anyone to make the finals out of the Eastern Conference just off of attrition.
And the Nets classic, just like, hey, us and the Jazz are always the third team in these kinds of things.
Well, the Nets now have 5 first-round picks tomorrow, which is, I don't know if that's shaping up for a trade. You would think there has to be at least some kind of trade. I don't think they're going to bring in 5 new guys.
They're going to trade guys away. You'd think, if anything, they've got
I don't know.
Johnson's an easy trade piece there, so it's
send us a couple of those first for Michael Porter Jr. and then we can talk. But yeah, look, the other thing here, just again, the Celtics doing this gap year thing, I think just shows again why they are one of the most savvy teams in the league, because you would see a lot of teams, try to make the best of not having a guy like Jason Tatum for a year and be like, all right, we're going to, fill in the gaps and put together. The Celtics are saying, fuck it. Jason Tatum's our guy. We're not going to have him. We're taking this year off. We're shedding all this salary. We're going to use this as almost an opportunity to get ahead for the future, even if it means going all in to be ass this year, which is not something you normally see a high-end contender do. But I admire, honestly, the presence of mind and the willingness to commit and do something like that rather than just try to tread water, because let's be honest, no matter what they did, the Celtics were not winning a championship next year without Jason Tatum unless they somehow acquired some other superstar. Yeah, they're winning it every year. But that'll do it for the NBA updates. We do have the draft tomorrow night and Thursday night, Pat. The NBA splitting it into 2 nights, which I just think is entirely unnecessary because the second round is so fucking irrelevant that I always thought it was kind of appropriate to have it start at like 11 p.m. Eastern.
With Taco Bell commercials going
but
over
now,
future Hall of Famers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe they want to avoid that, 10 years after the fact. But now we have the entire second round on its own night, even though over half of those players are not going to play.
That was purely for Bronny last year. I figured that was kind of be a one-off because the whole Bronny thing, they don't have that storyline to put this year. Shout out Liam McNeely. Wherever he's going to go, it's not going to be high enough, and he's going to prove the team right. And it's going to be great because he's going to be on a team that's not as good, less pressure. I love it. And we're biased, but I love it.
Oh, 100%. All right, let's get into the AFC South fantasy football preview, Pat.
Duval.
Obviously, including Liam Cohen's Jacksonville Jaguars. But, Pat, let's start with the Houston Texans here. I am unsure how I feel about the Texans right now. I am being pulled in 2 different directions. Obviously, I'm decked out in Texan shit right now. Don't let that affect anything you think right now. But I am so torn on this team because I'm seeing it from both sides. The side of them being ass next year is a pretty obvious one, right? Their offensive line is terrible. They traded their best offensive lineman, Laramie Tunsil, to the Washington Commanders. And the offensive line is what makes everything go or not go. If your quarterback doesn't have any time to do anything, if it can't open up running lanes, it is useless. Your offense is going to be capped. There's going to be a major ceiling on it. At the same time, they are not bringing back the exact same offensive line from last year, which was already underperforming even with Laramie Tunsil on it. They've got a new offensive line coach in the form of Cole Popovich, and they have a new offensive coordinator who is considered maybe one of the next up sort of coordinators, one of the next up minds in the NFL, Nick Caley, coming off of the Rams and Patriots coaching trees. I'm torn, Pat, because it feels like a situation where we could be looking back on it and Nick Caley is able to get more out of this offense than Bobby Slowick did. That's the reason they hired him. They're already talking about how he's more adaptable. He's not married to a specific scheme, which was a big criticism of Slowick last year, that he kind of stuck to his idea of what an offense should look like rather than tailoring it more to the players. So there's a part of me that wants to believe that they're going to make it work with what they have, but then the other part of me just looks at the utter lack of talent on the offensive line and says, don't overthink it. So that's where I'm at with the Texans. Just as a brief overview, again, bringing back the same head coach, new offensive coordinator with Nick Caley. The O-line is ass. The weapons, no Tank Dell, no Stephon Diggs. Obviously, Tank out for the year. Diggs now on the Patriots. They added Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. Run game was really good last year. Remains to be seen if they can replicate that this year. And the offense itself, again, a lot of talented players on it, but just not sure how it's going to go altogether. Pat, let's start with C.J. Stroud, I guess. The one thing I want to mention about C.J. Stroud before we kind of make predictions on him is there is some concern over his shoulder that it seems to be being brushed off by DeMeco Ryans. There was a quote a couple weeks ago that after C.J. missed some practice time where Ryan said, there's no concerns on my end, but then when he was asked if CJ had any work done on his shoulder in the offseason, he did not say no, which is a big problem. He said, that's it for CJ, guys, on the questions. That's it. What I said, that's it for him. He went on to say, he'll be fine. When the moment is for him to be ready to go, he'll be ready to go. I lean toward believing him that CJ will be okay when it's time to, get under the lights here. But that is concerning because to me, Pat, that all but tells me that he had a procedure done. Whether it was a cleanup procedure or anything more serious, if somebody asks you if he had a procedure done, you say no if the answer's no. You don't say, "Oh, guys, that's enough of the question." So that's one thing just to keep in mind. And I just spit all over my desk. That's one thing to just keep in mind and monitor about C.J. Stroud. Now that aside, how do we feel about C.J. Stroud as a fantasy asset, assuming health?
I don't feel strongly in either direction about him. I believe, ADP for Fantasy Pros has him at about QB 17, which feels fair. Again, there's a lot of depth at the QB position this year, and I think if I'm waiting until that point, I think there are other directions I'm going in than CJ Stroud. And just because I'm not in love with Stroud doesn't mean I'm not in love with a couple players on this Texans team right now, but you look down, like, there may even be another quarterback in this division that we're going to talk about that's similarly ranked to him that I may rather have. But, you look at some other guys in this area like Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy. It's like, I think I'd rather go with those guys over someone like CJ Stroud. Again, obviously no rushing upside almost whatsoever. And again, if you like him, it's a good value. It's a good value at the very least to take him. Like, you're not going to have to take him at QB5 like you did last year.
I didn't take him at QB5. I took him, but it wasn't at QB5. So that's my
But that's the thing is, so it's like, if you do believe in it, at QB17, that's not a big, that's fine. That's fine, but no thanks.
Yeah.
No thanks.
I'm right there with you. I don't see... Look, obviously, range of outcomes, literally anything can happen for any player, especially one as talented as C.J. Stroud. This was a guy who jumped onto the fantasy scene his rookie year as a pure pocket passer, more or less. But I just don't see the path or the reason to pick him over so many other guys, especially in a fantasy landscape where, Pat, we've talked about it over and over, like, rushing upside is king. And if you're going to get a guy without rushing upside, they need to have really outlandishly high passing upside. And I think CJ Stroud to a degree has that just because of his talent. But based on the floor that we saw last year and the fact that they didn't address that O-line, I mean, they addressed other things. So maybe things will get a little bit better here for CJ, at least in terms of just the coaching kind of helping them work through some of the roster weaknesses they have and maybe cover up some of those holes. I don't see it from a fantasy perspective where this is a guy that you want to commit your roster to. And granted, at QB 17, 18, he's a guy you could put on your bench and hope things get better, but just without having that rushing upside, I don't see the reason to really have that optimism.
He's not one of those, like, ideal stash guys. Like, if anything, Stroud's a guy you take if you kind of take two guys in that range and you're hoping one of them hits. But like I said, there are some other guys in that range that I kind of feel a little bit better about, them hitting.
Yeah, as far as CJ Stroud and a bounce back 2025 campaign, I think that's absolutely in the cards, but that does not mean he will be a consistently useful fantasy asset for you. And again, I tend to avoid, like, look, a pocket passing quarterback with a bad offensive line, let's just keep it that simple. That sounds like a recipe for disaster for fantasy football purposes. So I am all set on that. Now, one of the interesting things about the Texans last year, Pat, was even though their offensive line was bad, run blocking wise and run game wise, it was actually pretty good. Joe Mixon was a monster for the first 14-ish weeks of the fantasy football season. He was a top 5 back throughout that stretch. Kind of finished out with a whimper there, but somehow managed to put up incredible numbers despite a extreme lack of talent again on that offensive line. They just managed to run block pretty well. He is about RB19 right now. His new backup, Nick Chubb, RB57. What's the feeling on Joe Mixon right now, Pat?
I think he is a fantastic value at RB19. Like, he is, like, we're talking Pat's pal. Well, I threatened to make him a Pat's pal last year and didn't, and probably should have. But, not probably should have, I straight up should have. But you look at that, I think the biggest knock against him, obviously another year older, but the knock against him would be the offensive line. And that worked out last year just fine in a Bobby Slowick offense. Like, if we are truly in on Nick Caley as at least being this, more creative, unpredictable play caller compared to Bobby Slowick, where it felt like you knew everything that was coming with his offense, I'm not concerned about it. I've said it time and time again. I'm not a Nick Chubb hater. I just am not. I just don't believe in him very much at all at this point. Like, he does nothing for me in terms of altering Joe Mixon's status here. You know, I'm sure he's going higher ranked in consensus rankings. I have him as RB13 personally, so I like him as a borderline RB1 here. And, you know, I think if he's going at 19 there, I think that you could be looking at one of the better values of the first 2 or 3 rounds.
I, drum roll please, don't like him.
Brian hates old people.
Listen.
How old is he?
Yes, 28, 7.
Oh, he might as well be dead at that age.
He's basically dead. He's got a foot in the grave.
He's 28.
Look, this is one I fully acknowledge I could end up being wrong on because he was very good last year in this system. Here's why I'm not super in on him. Last 3 games of last year completely fell off a cliff. That's not really what I'm worried about. It's the fact, Pat, that everything went wrong for this offense last year, and Joe Mixon was kind of the sole survivor outside of Nico Collins when he was healthy, right, as far as fantasy football contributors. The Texans basically, through their actions this offseason, even though they didn't improve the line, said, what we did last year ain't going to work. That's not what we want to do. It was bad as a whole last year. I'm all set. To me, that doesn't scream, oh, Joe Mixon's going to have a better year this year because the Texans are trying to improve their offense as a whole. To me, it was more of a Joe Mixon was the diamond in the rough of whatever situation they found themselves in last year. And anytime you reshuffle that deck of situation, get rid of the play caller that allowed Joe Mixon to thrive so much, it just makes me a little hesitant, especially when it was a guy who, heading into last year, obviously I was already hesitant on him. He proved me completely wrong. He had a great year. To me, it felt more like an outlier year than something that I want to bank on happening in back-to-back years. Joe Mixon's efficiency still isn't good. He just volumed his way to great numbers last year. I think the Texans are trying hard enough to reshuffle the deck of what their offense is going to look like that I am not banking on that sort of anomalous performance that Joe Mixon had last year. Again, I fully cop to the fact that I could be wrong, but also Ian Hartitz put it, I think, pretty succinctly. He did a Texans preview, and I thought what he said about Mixon was appropriate. He has him as his RB20, and he said he put him behind guys who profile for similar roles in better offenses, including Omarion Hampton and James Conner. And I was like, yeah, like, I think you look at Joe Mixon and you look at how probably not great we think the Texans offense projects to be, and it makes it a harder sell that he is going to be a guy that repeats the performance from last year. Granted, he can fall off a little bit from last year and still return value. He finished as the RB13. He's going at around RB20, so I get it from that perspective. It's just a guy, Pat, that I already kind of had the flags, the alarm bells going off about a potential regression from him and other things that are just kind of speaking to that. So look, this isn't a guy that I feel like incredibly convicted on this take for him. This is just where I'm at right now, at least tentatively. There will be other players we talk about, especially with other teams in the AFC South, that I feel much more confidently on in either direction of either loving them or hating them. But as far as Joe Mixon right now, that's just where I'm at with him. I am not going to go out of my way to take him, even though he had that sort of standout performance the first, honestly, 3 quarters of last year. Nick Chubb, you and I are on the same page with him. It's just probably not going to happen. He's going to be a little annoying and steal a touchdown here or there. That's about it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Dameon Pierce and Woody Marks ended up with similar carry totals to Nick Chubb by the end of the season, just in terms of how well Nick Chubb is able to hold up or not hold up as far as his health goes. We've got the receivers, Pat. Nico Collins is the stud of this receiver room. Obviously, I think wide receiver 1 overall is within his realm of possibilities, within his range of outcomes, even on a not great offense, because anything they do achieve generally goes through Nico Collins. So I think at wide receiver 7, more than happy to take him there. I feel like he is just as... Even with all this turnover that the Texans are going through offensively, and even with the concerns that you have about them, it's a great wide receiver hitting his prime with at least a good quarterback chucking him the ball. I think that's as safe of a recipe for a great fantasy wide receiver as you can get.
I was going to say that even though we're not super high on C.J. Stroud, he is still an extremely effective pocket passer, and he loves Nico Collins. Like, out of all the other stuff that kind of happens in that offense with Stephon Diggs, with the deep shots of Tank Dell, Nico Collins was a constant when he was healthy last year. And especially now with no Dell, you get rid of Stephon Diggs, and you bring in someone like Christian Kirk, who's a solid addition, and 2 rookies. Nico Collins will be the guy in this offense. No question about it. And it's funny because he's going at wide receiver 7 and you love him, but you look at the guys ahead of him and you're like, yeah, but I think if you decide to go running back, a little early, or you're in a league like us where running backs go early, you could be looking at a spot to get an incredible value in Nico Collins, later on in the first round. Again, another one of just my absolute favorite players this year.
I don't think you're wrong for taking Nico Collins. I mean, I don't think you're wrong for taking him anywhere after Chase and Jefferson. I would say I would probably put Lamb at number 3. This is what consensus ranks have as well. It's just kind of what Logic has. But after those top 3, I'm not mad if you take Nico Collins. After Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, I mean, people are going to prefer, Puka, Neighbors, whatever.
I was about to say those 2. I still would, but at the same time, if you take Collins over them, I understand. Like, it's not like a definitively, but no. I think he's right there with those 3, Lamb, Puka, and Neighbors, in that second tier of wide receivers here.
Yeah, and I think you've got the argument, especially with Malik Neighbors, that like C.J. Stroud, Russell Wilson. Like, I think there's a fair argument to be had there, even though Malik Neighbors might be, a slightly better athlete or even just a different type of receiver than Nico Collins is. But yeah, Nico Collins, look, we love him over here, even with any uncertainties about the Texans offense. Even if the Texans offense is one of the worst in football, Nico Collins will get his. Obviously, he wouldn't finish as wide receiver 1 overall if the Texans are actually one of the worst offenses in football, but he will be, assuming health, a wide receiver 1, certainly, and a rock-solid player for your team, regardless of what happens with Houston this year overall. Now, the other receivers in this receiver room, Pat, we've got Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Noel. Jaden Higgins, probably the other major target as far as upside goes in this offense. He is expected to be the number 2 starting outside wide receiver next to Nico Collins. I don't mind him as a dart throw just because the upside is massive there if the offense does figure it out. And I firmly believe this more and more as the years go on, that rookies kind of run fantasy football in terms of the value that you can get out of them. Because if Stroud gets back to his old ways and Higgins is out there in 2 receiver sets and is tearing it up and is adjusting to the NFL well and is a monster threat in the red zone, you're going to be happy with him as a value.
Yeah, I was about to say if I could have another Texans receiver, it's Higgins by far, just because of the fact that we've seen Christian Kirk makes his money inside in the slot, and that'll be his role and he'll be out there, but that shouldn't take too much away from Higgins' snaps, and especially with no Tank Dell. Like, you saw, C.J. Stroud loves Tank Dell too. To get him involved, like, while I still think it's gonna run through Collins, I still think there's plenty to go around. I think it's kind of appropriate that he's going as someone you're going to get on your bench at wide receiver 54, but I'm cool with taking a shot on him like that. And like I said, I certainly prefer him to the likes of Kirk and Noel. I certainly think he has the best floor and the best upside of a Houston pass catcher not named Nico Collins.
Yeah, absolutely. Jalen Noel, I think, is more of a longer-term sort of hope that he ends up being something decent. I think if you're taking a shot on any wide receiver here beyond Nico Collins, it's definitely Jaden Higgins or Christian Kirk. Kirk could possibly end up as decently high floor-ish flex, just in full PPR leagues at the very least. I think, look, they went out and traded for him for a reason. Nick Caley has historically used 3 wide receivers, so I would not be surprised if he ends up being a usable player, especially with the fact that we don't expect the Texans to really have a super productive tight end. It's Dalton Schultz still. He
Not
got
even
extended.
In the top 200.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't put him on our list.
Yeah, he got extended 3-year deal by the Texans, but to me, that's just a good thing for the wide receivers in terms of fantasy. It means a guy that's not that good is going to be around for longer, and you don't really have to factor him in too often. So I think that's where the Texans' offense lies. No interest. All right. The Texans may have a bit of a shaky offensive outlook, Pat, but I'm not sure it gets shakier or just more hot ass than the Indianapolis Colts. It's a rough go out here in Indianapolis right now. Outlook for their team. Head coach is the same. Offensive coordinator is the same. The OL had a bit of a shakeup this offseason, Pat, losing center Ryan Kelly and right guard Will Fries, both to the Vikings, went over there in a package deal. Replaced with center Tanner Bortolini and right guard Matt Goncalves. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Tanner Tortellini!
General consensus from Colts fans that I've seen is that losing Ryan Kelly is not that big of a deal. They feel like Bortolini was ready to take over and that's not going to be much of a drop-off, if any. But losing Will Fries is a bit more of a concern. So, look, this offensive line, one thing you can say for the Colts is that the line is pretty good, even with this turnover. We still think it's going to be solid this year. Obviously, headlined by Quentin Nelson. It was, I think, PFF's number 12 O-line last year. So we're dealing with at least a solid base of an offensive line here. The problem is they don't have a quarterback, at least one that we believe is worth any sort of a damn here. So here's the situation. On top of being hot ass awful last year, Pat, and tapping himself out of games because he was eepy like Anthony Richardson did, he's also seeing doctors about his shoulder pain. And there is seemingly a good chance of re-aggravation in game should he be out there this year, according to doctors on the subject. He's seeing doctors right now because of aggravation on his previously injured AC joint in his shoulder. So Anthony Richardson's already not really participating, which the general consensus now is becoming that Daniel Jones has the inside edge to be this team's starting quarterback on opening night and for the beginning of the season. Now, that's all well and good, Pat, and Daniel Jones may very well be a better fantasy-friendly quarterback for the Colts' weapons than Anthony Richardson is, which is gross. However, he's also really bad, and I'm not excited for him. Daniel Jones has a career high, Pat, of 24 passing touchdowns, which he achieved his rookie year in 2019. So it's been a fucking minute for Daniel Jones. And he still, even in that year, produced no fantasy-relevant receivers. It was like Darius Slayton was there, and Golden Tate was there, and nobody was ever a consistently... Sterling Shepard was there. None of those guys were consistent fantasy assets. Evan Ingram was also there. He still didn't do shit there. Obviously, as we know, he didn't really do shit until he left New York. But fucking wonder why that was. So look, it's hard for me... Well, let's just move past this part, Pat. Nobody's starting a Colts quarterback beyond maybe a streamer in the most friendly situation ever, because both these guys can move with their legs, whoever the quarterback ends up being. But quarterback is not a factor in terms of the Colts offense for fantasy purposes. Nobody's starting a Colts quarterback, so we got to look at the bigger picture here.
Especially we talk about how the QB position's pretty deep this year. You don't even need to fucking think about this, man. Just don't do it.
No, don't think about it. So that's why we have to kind of just look at it in terms of the receivers and the running backs. What hurts me about this, Pat, is I actually really like the Colts' weapons as players. I love me some Josh Downs. Michael Pittman Jr. is a solid-ass wide receiver. Tyler Warren is a guy I want to be excited about at tight end. But with this quarterback situation, and with the fact that there might be low 20s in total of touchdowns to go around and not a ton of yards to go around for these receivers, I just find it hard to get excited about or really target any of these guys unless they fall quite a bit in drafts. I don't think I want to own a piece of this icky-ass Colts offense. So as much as I want to be like, oh, Josh Downs was a monster, I'm just all set. I don't think I want any piece.
I will say I did just double-check to make sure that Michael Pittman is going as the wide receiver 50. I was, I thought I made a mistake. I thought I made a mistake there.
Yeah.
But at 50, I'm in on that. Because, again, you're not banking on him like in years past to be one of your wide receiver ones or twos. You're looking at somebody in the mix of a flex. He's not somebody I'm relying on, but I think for the value, if it weren't for the value, I wouldn't be in. That's the only thing that's keeping me in. But I understand, and I hate it because I love Josh Downs. I loved Josh Downs as a rookie 2 years ago. But it's just, and it's crazy again because we talked about it last year where like the Bears coaching and front office's ass were on fire. I feel like that's the Colts this year. And they're fucked. Shane Steichen and company are fucked. And I think they're in deep doo-doo. But, you know, the fact that Josh Downs is going before Michael Pittman is a little wild here, in my opinion. I think in general, like, I would just rather have Pittman. I think Downs is sort of the more exciting upside guy. We've seen Pittman be solid here with a gaggle of geriatric quarterbacks that roll in and out of there. And Anthony Richardson. So I'm cool with that. Tyler Warren, I'm just not nuts about it. You know, they took him with high draft capital. The Colts have not been a team to use a tight end very often, except for the funny Mo Alley Cox touchdowns here and there the last few years. It's just never been a huge part of their offense. You could say, oh, now it will be. I'd rather see it first. And then go into next year saying, oh, yeah, Tyler Warren is a clear-cut tight end one. I'd rather have Colston Loveland, for example, if we're talking rookie tight ends here. So out of this group of pass catchers, Pittman's really the only one that I think I have some interest in here, just based on where he's going. And it's funny because we talk all this doo-doo, dad, gaga, whatever, and yet there's Jonathan Taylor, who is still really fucking good and has a man named DJ Giddens and Khalil Herbert as his running mates in the backfield. There is zero competition. As bad as, well, not as bad, but, you know, as unnecessary. So Dallas Clark never existed. Dallas Clark played there like 15 years ago. You weren't even alive when Dallas Clark was playing, probably. Not my point, but yes, Dallas. We're talking Peyton Manning era. Yes, they use the tight end a lot. In the Shane Steichen era, no, they don't use tight ends particularly often.
I'm thinking of all the tight ends they've cycled through. I'm thinking like Trey Burton was there. Like
Jacob Tamme,
Eric Ebron was there.
Yes.
Like it's been pretty gross since Dallas Clark. So yeah, we're not using Dallas Clark as evidence here.
Bro, I'm 40. Yeah, Unk. No, we need more unks.
We're all unks.
We need more unks watching. Back to Jonathan Taylor. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Going as RB9 right now, and in spite of how shaky we think this offense is going to be, I'm in on Jonathan Taylor again. And even with I think there's a lot of great running backs here this year. I'm still in on him as a solid. Low-end RB1. The only thing is, I think there's some more exciting options. Like, we talked about our Lord and Savior, Bucky Irving, how much we love him. I've talked about how much I love Chase Brown. I think I'd rather have Christian McCaffrey. Like, there's this group of guys that are in a similar kind of tier, but I like the upside of those guys a little more. But if we're talking floor as a low-end RB1, Jonathan Taylor's about as good as they come.
Look, Jonathan Taylor, I'm all in on Jonathan Taylor. And this is coming from a guy that drafted Jonathan Taylor last year in the first round and was thoroughly disappointed, mostly because his season got derailed by a high ankle sprain very early on. But when Pat, especially in the fantasy playoffs last year, let's look at what Jonathan Taylor did the last couple weeks of the season. How about from week 16 through 18? 39.8, 26.6, and 24.5. This is a guy that absolutely still has it. This is a guy that you have to stay with the mindset of injury prone is not really a thing, and players can just get hurt a lot because they are running backs and it's the game of football and it fucking happens, and you shouldn't let it dictate how you view them in a future season unless it is like one singular sort of chronic thing that they're constantly dealing with. Just look at guys that have bounced back from injury in the past. Christian McCaffrey, obviously a bad example right now because last year he was hurt, but this was a guy we had this conversation about before where he missed previous seasons with injury and then came back and was absolutely nuclear. I still think Jonathan Taylor is one of the premier talents at the position in the league, and on a team that is going to be searching for answers to do anything else, especially with their quarterback situation, with a solid offensive line in front of him. I love Jonathan Taylor at especially ADP of 19th overall.
Yeah.
I would take him over Bucky Irving. I would take him, I think, over Devon Achane. I would take him over Christian McCaffrey. I think then you get to the only backs higher than that are Derrick Henry, Ashton Genty. I'll stop there. I'll take those guys over Jonathan Taylor for sure. But I love Jonathan Taylor this upcoming year. I think everybody should love him. I think this is as great of a value for him as you're going to get.
That's not a take that I'm like, oh my goodness, no, I'm upset about. Like, again, Jonathan Taylor, again, it's just, I think it's a little more concern just about the situation he's in. But like you said, still one of the premier talents, was healthy last year. Hopefully that keeps up. And in zero competition, there's no hilarious Zach Moss like there was 2 years ago. Like there is, I'd argue he's got some
work, but he definitely has some of the most solid workload.
I would argue that he has got one of the safest paths to playing time than anybody else in the league. Yes, big load back in the chat.
I'm totally with you. Just to circle back on the receivers real quick, because you were mentioning, Michael Pittman and where he was ranked. I get the appeal of a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver 50-ish, especially when you look down around that range and, even you could even substitute him with Josh Downs for this argument. I get the appeal of either one of them as a potential, or as certainly one of them will be, wide receiver 1 on their own team, getting them that late in drafts. I get it. My concern is that they just become roster fodder because the quarterback situation is so bad that they become those guys that are putting up enough points that you don't drop them, you don't know if you should start them, and it just becomes an irritant. So I don't foresee myself having any of the Colts wide receivers just because I am so concerned about what this passing game is going to look like. Anthony Richardson can't throw or see or even be on the field, apparently. Daniel Jones has been hilariously bad and not supporting a fantasy wide receiver basically ever in his career. I'm not going to bank on that happening now. Like, look, do I think Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs are both probably going to outproduce their ADP of 45 and 48, what I'm looking at right now for wide receivers? Yeah. But do I think that might materialize itself in the terms of them being wide receiver 36 and 37? Maybe. And I'm still not starting those fucking guys, not happily at least. Yeah. So I would rather take shots in this range on either another position or looking at the wide receivers ranked near them, Ricky Pearsall, because I just think the Niners are going to be in a bounce-back year. Not so much Cooper Kupp because I don't like their situation either in Seattle. Darnell Mooney, though, in on him. Banking on maybe a Keon Coleman step forward. I'd rather take him. Emeka Egbuka, I don't know how that's going to shake out because obviously he's a clear wide receiver 3 there, but a good talent in a good offense. It's just more enticing for me to take those dice rolls than it is taking a guy for the sake of, oh, it's Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Like, we know they're good players. Yeah, but God, the situation's so bad, and I don't see a world where it gets good this year, at least in terms of the passing game, which is also why I like Jonathan Taylor so much. And just a note on Tyler Warren, because I do really like the talent, and I wanted to like Tyler Warren this year, but I think the just general domination of rookie tight ends the last couple of years, or at least just, the one standout in each year with Bowers and Laporta, I think that might be inflating his price just a little bit. Right now he's tight end 15, even though he is a clear number 3 at best target projection-wise on his team with a bad quarterback. So I'm a little bit worried about that just in general. I think other leagues may reach for him beyond tight end 15 as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they took him as like the top 12 tight end. I just don't see it for him. I feel like the only way that he emerges is if they use him out of the backfield the way Penn State did, which I think they will a little bit, but I'm talking we need to see like this offense is so bad that they are using him like a Taysom Hill, where any way we can move the sticks, we need to do it. And if it's Tyler Warren getting somehow fucking 15 touches in a game, then so be it, like what the Saints did with Taysom Hill. And that's a possibility. So, like, if you want to draft Tyler Warren on this outside shot that he becomes just the focal point of their passing attack, look, they drafted him with a top 15 pick. It could happen. It's just ugly and not super likely. But look, if you believe in Tyler Warren, take him, because this brings me back to just an overarching fantasy point that even when you come together and land at these conclusions based on logic and history and projection, like there will be exceptions to every sort of outlook and thing you can think of for each player. If you think you can identify that exception and you think that exception is the form of Tyler Warren, who his talent is just going to win out and let him emerge in a terrible situation, great, take him, because you got to find those kind of exceptions to get an edge. I tweeted this whole rant out the other day, and I think that's very important. But as of right now, in terms of the logical projection for him, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great for any
I'd
of the
rather be
goals.
wrong about. I'd rather
exactly
stay out of it and be wrong.
100%. Pat, let's move on to the Tennessee Titans here and finish out with a finale of the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Tennessee Titans outlook, head coach is the same, offensive coordinator is the same. Their offensive line was terrible last year, PFF number 28, but they did add Dan Moore from the Steelers to be their new left tackle and Kevin Zeitler from the Lions to be their new right guard, so you would assume at least some improvement there. Their weapons, they lost Nikhil Alexander Walker is what I was going to fucking say. Nick Westbrook-Akina, sorry, had a wrong hyphenated name. Nick Westbrook-Akina, and they added Tyler Lockett. The run game is kind of fine, and the offense overall, look, it's going to be completely Cam Ward dependent. And I think that's where you really need to fall with the Titans offense. This is how I'm viewing the Titans, Pat. I wrote it down nice and succinct here in these notes. The Titans are in one of those it has to get better, but how much better is it going to get situations. And I think that's where you really need to figure it out. Titans quarterbacks last year combined for just 22 passing touchdowns, and I think everybody's first instinct is to say, oh, Cam Ward's going to be better. Even if he's raw as a rookie, he's going to be better than the dumpster fire combo of Will Levis and Mason Rudolph last year, right? Like, it has to be better. You can say that, and then remember the fact that Caleb Williams only threw 20 touchdowns last year, and project the fact that if Cam Ward did that, that would not be surprising and would even be considered, an okay-ish rookie year with something to build on just because of the fact that the Titans supporting cast around him isn't that great. And Cam Ward is considered a more raw prospect than Caleb Williams was. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see Cam Ward throw a touchdown total in the low 20s, which then gives the Titans overall offense and weapons, it makes their fantasy outlook basically the same as it was last year. I mean, yeah, there might be a few more yards to go around with Cam Ward than there was with Levis and Mason Rudolph, but overall, it's not really going to change their scoring output all that much. So I think how you view the Titans has to depend on how you view Cam Ward. If you think Cam Ward is going to come in and immediately be like a 30 touchdown kind of guy, and a guy who, even if he doesn't carry too much of his own fantasy value, can at least lead this team up and down the field and put other guys in scoring situations, then cool, invest in some Titans. I'm not really there. I don't have any reason to believe that Cam Ward is going to come in and light things on fire immediately. It feels like something that's going to be a little slower developing. I like Cam Ward as a player and as a prospect, don't get me wrong. I just don't think he's stepping into a situation that will allow him to be this super productive guy that kind of raises the ceilings and floors of everyone else around him right away. So I'm not super high on the Titans just in general.
Yeah, I'm really not either. The only guy that I'm even slightly interested in, which is odd because I'm very anti this guy's Calvin Ridley, just from the perspective that should things work out with Cam Ward, it's going to be Calvin Ridley who's going to be the main beneficiary of that. It's not going to be Tyler Lockett. It's not going to be our boy Chigakonkwo. He is definitively the number one option in that offense, and should they form a strong connection, could be looking at a solid player here. And I feel like at wide receiver 35, a low-end wide receiver 3, it's okay to kind of take that gamble. If he's more of a guy that's going to be in your flex rather than someone you're counting on a week-to-week basis. I don't hate that. Is he going to be someone that I'm jumping off the page at the draft if he's there when I get there? No. But he's at least someone that I'm looking at and being like, yeah, I'm not out on Calvin Ridley. Which, again, I've been out on Calvin Ridley for the last how many years now.
I'm out on Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
I'm out on him. I'm good.
Yeah. You have a history.
I mean, look, even last year, like, I didn't have any shares of Calvin Ridley last year. I did 2 years ago, and he disappointed me. But last year, like, Again, first I want to say Calvin Ridley is a guy that is being given a lot of credit for reaching 1,000 yards, which, can we stop fucking doing that to try to say that players are good for fantasy football? 1,000 yards, as I've mentioned with Najee Harris, because he's done this for like 4 straight years. 1,000 yards, if you just barely creep over that number, is not that good for fantasy.
17 games now, too.
It's like 60 yards a game. Can we stop pretending that that's like some mark that is like super impressive? It's good for real life if you're doing that every year because you're contributing something every single week, and sure, whatever. But for fantasy football, this idea that like I'm supposed to be impressed by you getting 1,000, I'm not. That doesn't mean you're consistently productive in fantasy football. Well, for last year it is. Yeah, I mean, Mike Evans last year hit the 1,000-yard mark just by sheer brute force because Liam Cohen's a freak. But like overall, it's more of a Najee Harris rant. Oh, fuck.
Duval.
But in general, more of a Najee Harris rant and a Calvin Ridley rant. Like, he had 1,017 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. And I'm seeing people point to that stat line like, oh, he went over 1,000 yards with Levis and Mason Rudolph, whatever, and, the touchdown should go up. I'm not convinced they're going to. And I'm also not convinced that the guys around him aren't going to just replace, like, Nick Westbrook-Akina in the aggregate. They drafted a couple rookies that they really like. Elik Ayamanor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is getting a lot of buzz. Pardon me for believing that this guy who has routinely disappointed whatever your expectations for him are every year, that he's not just going to be this super duper alpha for the rookie quarterback that he can rely on every single week. Calvin Ridley has not shown himself to be that guy for years. Like, I think there's an effort thing, a focus thing with Calvin Ridley, maybe sort of the same things that have plagued, Amari Cooper periodically in the past that turn these guys into these maybe blow up one week and then completely disappear the next week type of players. For Calvin Ridley, the fact that he's shown himself to be one of those major boom-bust guys and is now playing it with a quarterback in a situation that I don't think is that much different from last year, he's just another one that I'd rather take shots on somebody else. I get it that he may outproduce his ADP by a couple spots, but I think the ship of hoping Calvin Ridley gets back to like a really productive fantasy receiver has sailed. I just don't care anymore. I don't think he has it in him.
I don't disagree with that either, but again, I think it's all about where he's going. Like, the fact that he's going this high above Michael Pittman to me is kind of just like, oh, okay. But again, I think there's a chance there. But again, you talk about looking at other guys in that range. Where do I even have him here on mine? Oh, I never got to Tennessee. I am a fraud. I never ranked all the way through the alphabet.
He's wide. He put it this way: he's wide receiver 33 in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. The guys ahead of him, obviously, they're ahead of him for a reason, but like I prefer them by a fucking country mile over Calvin Ridley. You've got Travis Hunter, Teteroa McMillan, Jalen Waddle, Chris Godwin, even Chris Olave. Chris Olave is dicier, but the rest of them absolutely prefer over Calvin Ridley. The guys behind him, Jordan Addison, for reasons that we've talked about wide receiver twos on their own team. Yeah. Uncertain just because of the uncertainty with that and J.J. McCarthy. But then George Pickens is a wide receiver two on his own team, but I think the Cowboys are due for a bounce back. I think he's a guy that's going to have those boom weeks a little bit more consistently, honestly, than Calvin Ridley. Jerry Jeudy, Rome Odunze, Khalil Shakir, mixed bag of archetypes there, but I think if anything, I would prefer a guy like Jacoby Myers a couple picks later just for the consistency. Ooh. And if anything, I may just be targeting a different position at this point in the draft, to be honest. Calvin Ridley, let's put it this way. I see the vision for why he would outproduce the ADP and why he would be a good pick. He's a headache to me, and I'm good. I don't want the headache.
Yeah, and I sit here talking about this as if I'm not going to take a wide receiver with my first 4 picks and have absolutely no interest in anyone in this range. So,
totally fair. I think that covers the receivers.
I'm not interested in this running game. I was just kind of going to move the
yeah.
Line. I'm not, and honestly, if I am taking one of them, I think I'm taking Tajay Spears. Going at 42.
I am with you.
At 129 over Tony Pollard. I mean, Tony Pollard was solid last year. I believe he only had like 5 touchdowns, which isn't great. But, he was getting a big workload. And Brian Callahan said that this may be like a three-way committee. Again, I don't believe it. Pete Carroll said the Raiders might be a running back by committee. So I don't tend to believe everything these guys say. But if he's saying that, hey, we may want to temper Tony Pollard's workload, and you have a guy in Tajay Spears who has proven to be a very solid piece, and Kalel Mullings, who was a linebacker in 2022 and is now a 235-pound running back. They said they would like to even get him involved, possibly. Again, this is just a backfield that I'm avoiding for the other things we've talked about, that the offense may not be spectacular. And you talked about it with Joe Mixon, saying that he kind of volumed his way to his production. I'd say that's more so true for Tony Pollard.
That's true.
And Joe Mixon is better, and in a better offense than Tony Pollard is right now. And I've liked Tony Pollard a lot in the past, but I feel like this is kind of, he might be that sitting duck starting running back. There seems to be one every year where a guy's a starter and you look at him and you just go, I don't know if this guy will be the starter by the end of the year. And Tony Pollard feels like that guy to me. And going at RB20, RB28, depending on the consensus rankings, I like a lot of these younger guys better. You know, I'd rather have a guy like Quinshon Judkins, a Marion Hampton, some other guy. Even you look at like RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, maybe even like a Jaguars running back. But like I don't. It's just not a situation that I find myself likely to invest in. And if anything, it will be Spears as somebody on my bench, hoping that Pollard's downfall does in fact happen.
Yeah, well, again, like Tony Pollard was up and down last year, right? But overall, volumed his way to a decent enough finish. The Titans came into last year with the plan of having a 1A, 1B. That was all we heard throughout the preseason. We had endless conversations about these split backfields and who we would have rather. And the Titans were one of those that projected to be really tough to call. It ended up being Tony Pollard just because of necessity. Tajay Spears battled injuries all year. And again, got to get into the mindset of injury prone isn't really a thing, especially when 2 of Tajay Spears' 4 injuries last year were concussions. So those are very circumstantial things that as a running back, like no one running back is really going to be more prone to concussions than another. It's just kind of shitty luck at that point. Now I know when you suffer a concussion, you are more likely to suffer one, but the types of hits that would cause a concussion are not, like, those are just random. Those just fucking happen. It's also why Tajay Spears had the very large poofy helmet thing going on last year. But provided both these guys are healthy coming into this year, and provided, you assume that Tajay's not going to face the same level of misfortune this year, which I think is a fair bet, he's going to be a thorn in Pollard's side, and Pollard was already not that great of a player to own in fantasy. Pat, Tajay Spears was the RB3 overall from week 15 through 17 last year. Last year, when he finally got healthy and was on the field, 24.2 against the Bengals in week 15, 20.1 against the Colts in week 16, and 11.8 against the Jags in week 17. He was getting involved, and more importantly, he was scoring the touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns in that stretch. I think
way more dynamic in the passing game.
4 touchdowns in that stretch, excuse me. Yeah, more dynamic in the passing game as well.
We saw him outsnap Derrick Henry 2 years ago. Again, circumstances and game flow obviously dictated a lot of that. But at the end of the day, they were still willing to put him on the field more than Derrick Henry 2 years ago. Again, Brian Callahan was not there then, though. That's my only slight concern about Tajay Spears, is that he just may not be the guy that Brian Callahan and company are in love with either. It just may not be someone that's currently on this roster.
Again, they used him a lot at the end of last season, though, so I think that is something to note. Especially, this is more so about the fact that, again, Fantasy Pros consensus has Tajay Spears going 14 picks later than Tony Pollard. If you're telling me who I have to invest in between those two guys, like, it's definitely Tajay Spears.
Yes,
so that's where I'm at with that backfield. And then, Pat, as far as our boy Chigakonkwo goes,
no.
Nah, probably
He was
not.
ranked 199 by rule. I had to add him on by my own rules. I had to put him on the sheet, but no, sorry.
And look, for posterity, like, let's just lay out the outcome or the world where he is really good for fantasy. He has a path to be a top 2 target on this team. He does, because it's really just Calvin Ridley as the top wide receiver. The other guys, it's a wait and see with Tyler Lockett and the rookies that they have. Also, not touching Tyler Lockett, by the way. Fucking old, and he's on the Titans. When you're old and on the Titans, good night. That is, we have plenty of evidence for that. But he's got a path, and so let's say Cam Ward does come out and throws 35 touchdowns in year one. Chigakonko is probably going to be a good tight end. So just a guy to keep an eye on for that reason. I think less a guy I want to draft, more a guy I want to see week one. Cam Ward comes out, looks fucking fantastic. Then, scoop up Chigakonko because he's probably going to be a big beneficiary in a light receiving depth chart. All right, let's move on, Pat, to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Duval.
It's much funnier with the video, too.
The sound bites are going to thrive in the Jaguars section. All right. Now, here's where the Jaguars stand, Pat. Liam Cohen brought in as the new head coach. Offensive coordinator will be Grant Udinski, coming over from the Minnesota Vikings. The offensive line, pretty mid the last couple years. They did add Patrick McCarry, though, at right guard, so maybe a little bit of a boost there for them. Their weapons, almost a total overhaul. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. is still there, and two of their running backs are still there. But they added Travis Hunter, Diami Brown, and my boy, Bay Show Tootin', and lost Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. So they lost two guys who have been big parts of their offense the last couple years. So we got to see how they're going to compensate for that, what they're going to do differently. Liam Cohen is the X factor here, obviously. Renewed reason for optimism just because he is in the building, replacing Doug Peterson and the completely uninspiring Press Taylor, who we people wanted gone for a long time. Obviously, the upside case here for the Jags is that Cohen is just that dude, unlocks Trevor Lawrence finally and the rest of the offense. The downside is that Liam Cohen ends up being overhyped and or Trevor is just a lost cause. I right now am leaning toward Liam Cohen being very, very good for this offense. Whether he ends up being an overall great head coach or not, I don't know. But will he be good for the offense? I absolutely think so.
Again, like you kind of said for some guys, can he bring enough out of Trevor Lawrence for him to sustain a good fantasy offense? I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. Will Trevor necessarily be a fantasy relevant guy? Maybe not. Maybe not, but I definitely... There's a chance. Well, I was about to say, I would rather have Trevor Lawrence than CJ Stroud if I have to draft one of those two guys going into it. I think the upside is there. I do think Stroud's floor is a bit better, but I think Lawrence, the upside, is certainly there. We saw what Liam Cohen did with Baker Mayfield, and granted, it turns out Baker's just a better quarterback than Trevor as a former first-round pick. But Trevor hasn't been bad. He's just never lived up to what he can truly be, and it's true. If it doesn't happen with Liam Cohen, kill it.
It's over.
We're done.
Yeah,
it's over with that. But again, they brought in Doug Peterson to try and save him after Urban Meyer. It's like the future is youth, and Liam Cohen is a much younger, more inspiring choice. And I think the odds of this happening are likely. Trevor's one of my favorites in terms of if you go with two guys more towards the end of the quarterbacks. If you're the last guy in your league to take a quarterback and you take two, taking Trevor in that group is a good pick in my eyes. Going is what?
I agree.
He'll be 19, 121. That's round 10, 11.
He'll go undrafted in a lot of leagues, which is he's a guy to keep an eye on at that point. But I agree with you, as a late round quarterback pick, absolutely a guy that you can go after and pair with another sort of dart throw quarterback. But look, as far as those later picked quarterbacks, like, he's got as much reason for optimism as any. And I know people are tired of hearing about the possible Trevor Lawrence breakout, but this is kind of just how it goes in the NFL sometimes. You have to realize that situation dictates so much of how guys are going to produce offensively. Look no further than, different position, but Terry McLaurin, Pat, people for years were like, when is this guy ever going to fucking fully break out to this great wide receiver that he's supposed to be? Well, guess what? He gets Jaden Daniels as his quarterback and immediately hits that ceiling of what he was supposed to be. There's a chance that Liam Cohen is that guy for Trevor Lawrence, and it's a really low investment for you to take a shot on that. Like Trevor Lawrence, again, he could be a guy you pick up in free agency or prior to week one or after week one if you see it start to work out. Or if you're savvy enough, I would probably, if you don't take a quarterback early, I would draft him and just hold him on the bench for a week. And then if he's not really good week one, send him packing. Kick him up.
Vampire team starting QB? Question mark.
He was my first thought. He was my first thought when we came up with that. So Trevor Lawrence, look, not a guy I'm going to plant my flag in by any means, but a guy that I do think will at least be solid and can make the weapons around him good. Pat, let's go to the backfield. The main event of the evening.
This is fucking gross, man.
Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, and Bayshall Tootin. Fuck.
The lack of immediacy was beautiful there.
All right. Let's be realistic about this backfield.
Nasty.
Look, I think there's a good reason to take any of these backs, right? Like as a dart throw, as a sort of investment, because I do believe Liam Cohen is going to create a productive backfield. The worst case scenario, and maybe the most likely one, is that all these guys are going to get work and that none of them are consistently reliable. Because here's the thing, right? Let's take a look at the Buccaneers backfield where Liam Cohen's coming from. Obviously, Bucky Irving emerged. Rashad White was still serviceable for at least a large portion of the season. Sean Tucker, the one time he got a lot of touches, he was really good. So I think that the concern here is that you're looking at a Jags team with skill set wise semi-comparable backs to what the Bucs had, but a worse line and a overall less productive offense. Like, I'm not going to look at what the Bucs have done the last few years and just assume Cohen's going to get them to those heights just because he did it in Tampa. Tampa may have just been a better team. Certainly they had a better O-line. Yes. So the concern here is that the work is spread out amongst these guys, that it's annoying and none of them are super fun to start. But there is a case where they're all productive and the backfield does give you enough to feel good about at least two of them. I would say Etienne, Pat, it's a guy I've had to convince myself on, but he's a guy that I am interested in now that the dust has settled a little bit. And here's why. He's going to be involved no matter what. No matter what. No matter how this backfield shakes out. Even if Tank Bigsby takes over RB1 duties, even if Bayshall Tootin takes over RB1 duties, Travis Etienne is going to be involved in that pass game. And so I think it's hard for me to envision a world where he doesn't at least have a season like what Rashad White had last year, where he's maybe not that good, but he's putting out good numbers just as that safety valve, receiving back, guy that they trust. Cohen's been nothing but positive when talking about Travis Etienne this offseason. So he's just the guy that I most envision being most involved, at least early on in the season. Now, things may change as the season goes on, as they did with the Bucs backfield last year. Bucky Irving wasn't doing shit week one, and then things evolved. But I think Travis Etienne is the guy that, look, he was the RB3 2 years ago. And last year was dealing with a bunch of injuries. Like, I just see such a clear upside case for him because there's a chance he could get back to even that, Pat. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to finish as the RB3. But, like, top 10 is in his range of outcomes. And I think worst case, if he's healthy, is the Rashad White role, where you can still have him in your flex on certain weeks. And the price...
Rashad White saved me in guillotine a lot last year.
Exactly. And the price is just so affordable to me. At RB, 34 consensus ranks, we're looking at, again, who below him in these ranks has achieved anything in the grand scheme of fantasy football, Pat? Ramondre Stevenson, Javonte Williams, Zach Charbonnet, Jordan Mason. He was really good with the Niners for a half of last year. But Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby, the guys above Travis Etienne. I think I'd rather have Travis Etienne than at least these first four guys, which is Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Tyrone Tracy, and Brian Robinson Jr. Then we get to the rookies, and it gets a little dicier. I'd much rather have Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins just for the upside. But Travis Etienne, like... I see the vision a little bit with Travis Etienne. How do you feel about this backfield, and what are you seeing it breaking down like?
See, I think, unfortunately, the worst case scenario is going to happen in which nobody's going to be able to truly emerge as a rock-solid, reliable guy here. I do think you make some good points on Etienne, and the thing is they could have easily just traded him. The fact that Liam Cohen did not trade him goes to show that, like, hey, we like this guy. The fact that they did not use I mean, a 4th-round pick isn't nothing to take Bashal Tutin, but they could have literally taken Ashton Genty at 5, or hell, traded up for 2. Like, they could have taken Ashton Genty and had a potentially generational running back talent, and they didn't. And they hung on to Travis Etienne, and with all those good guys going in the 2nd or 3rd, they didn't take him. So there has to be some kind of belief here in Travis Etienne, unless Tank Bigsby is secretly his darling, which I just quite frankly don't think that's the case. But unfortunately, I think Bigsby will exist, and I think Tutin will exist at least a little. I do have to say, I would rather have Bigsby than Tutin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And as much of a meme as he is, I'm really not terribly interested in Tutin, even as one of these. Sorry everybody, as one of these
disrespect.
Kind of mid-round rookie running backs here.
Disrespect.
But, like, compared to Tony Pollard, I'd rather have Travis Etienne. Just again, because that offense just provides so much greater upside. But probably a backfield I'd avoid unless I inevitably go 0 RB and have no choice.
See, I can't say it's a backfield to avoid because of just the belief that I have in Liam Cohen to make it a good backfield.
You've got to draft all 3 of them, and you're going to draft both of
them.
Right,
but here's the thing. This time last year, we were talking about the Bengals, right? Before we knew how good Chase Brown was going to be. And I'm not saying the Jags are going to score the type of points that the Bengals scored last year. Certainly not. But it's just when you have a backfield that looks like it's going to be so fruitful in general, like, you gotta take shots. Like I think because there is a chance one guy emerges over the rest. And obviously, look, the flip side to my Travis Etienne support is that Tank Bigsby was the much more efficient back last year. 4.6 yards per carry is nothing to sneeze at. That was a big second-year leap for Bigsby. And now with a new regime that has no ties to anybody, you would assume we're entering with a level playing field, and anybody could take over as the RB1 because no allegiances, right? And that could very well be Tank Bigsby. I'm just willing to default to the fact that last year was probably mostly affected by Etienne's injury, and I think that's why he tanked so much. And it's just a guy we've seen do it before. And again, at the bare minimum, he's going to be involved in the passing game. So that's why I would take my shot on Etienne. But look, across multiple leagues, I'll probably draft all 3 of these guys, like in different spots, because I think even in like my main league, Pat, even in our league, I'll probably, if I can, try to draft 2 of them, because I think there's a chance that I think there's a chance that 2 of them are fantasy relevant. Whether I have the 2 of them that are, I don't. That remains to be seen. But it will at least ensure that I have one of the ones that is right, and that includes Bashal Tutin, who could very well Bucky Irving his way to relevance this year. Moving on to the wide receivers here in Jacksonville, Pat. I don't know about you. I don't have a lot to say about Brian Thomas Jr. He's fucking awesome. He's really, really good. Draft him. Everything he did his rookie year lines up with guys who have produced for the future, like his rookie, yards per route run and whatever total bullshit. It's all in the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors tier of guys Malik Neighbors fellow rookie, but guys who produce for years. He is as good of a bet to be good as it gets, especially.
And like we said, there's all the chance in the world that Trevor Lawrence and this offense just get even better. We saw BTJ eating it up with fucking Mac Jones out there last year. Just a great should finish the year as a wide receiver 1. Now I'm gonna say something here. I don't like Travis Hunter.
I love this because this will be our biggest disagreement we've ever had on this show, just overall.
I just think the talent is undeniable. The talent is absolutely undeniable. I'm not saying that he will be bad by any means. The thing that I'm just worried about is I read some stuff from Liam Cohen saying that the reason why he's getting so much work on offense is because they already know how good he is defensively. Mm-hmm. Which leads me to believe that he's going to be playing a lot of defense. And we saw him do it all at Colorado. I just don't necessarily think the snap count, the amount of time he's on the field on offense, is going to be worthy of a wide receiver 32 ADP. I just think if I'm taking a wide receiver in that range, I just think I'm going to take a guy who is likelier to be on the field more. Again, this could be a historic whiff, and Travis Hunter could be on the field 100% of the snaps on offense. But that's just my concern right now, is hearing him being raved about as a defender. And if that's a stronger side, then of course they're going to want him out there as a cornerback. And it just worries me. Again, could he be like Tank Dell was 2 years ago and produce incredibly well in a small sample size? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think the fact that he's going, still as a mid-level wide receiver 3 there, I think I just would rather go somewhere with a little more certainty in the role. Again, we could be sitting here at the end of the year where he doesn't play a ton of snaps and still pops the fuck off. And I could sit here and be like, okay, well, at least my concern was justified, but he just proved me wrong as a talent. But in this situation, I would go in a different direction there. And I'd say if he falls, Travis Hunter is not falling in any leagues. If anything, he is going to be very excitedly picked higher than ADP. But for me personally, I'm just, stop calling me Bob. No, he's just not for me. And again, we could be talking about this in a few months from now, and I'm absolutely eating crow. But that's how I feel about it right now.
Travis Hunter is a leading candidate to be one of my guys for this year. I totally understand what you're saying. The concerns about the snap share are the biggest concern as far as Travis Hunter. The only concern about Travis Hunter. I saw that quote.
That is my only concern. Yes.
Yeah. I saw that quote you mentioned. To me, I didn't feel any sort of way about it because what it indicated to me and what they expanded upon within that quote was offense is just a little more nuanced than defense, especially when you have such great defensive instincts. Like you need to learn the audibles. You need to learn all the different routes. Not that he has to learn routes, but how the Jaguars want him to do certain things. It's just got a lot that he needs to learn. So that's why he's spending time there. They basically look at him and they're like, oh, he's good on defense. I think they knew that already. And I think they knew that when they already spouted out the quote of he's going to be primarily offense for us. Now, obviously, we don't know what that means. We don't know if primarily offense means 80% of snaps on the offense and 20 on defense, or if it means 60-40. We don't know. Where I'm at with Travis Hunter is I am going to take, assuming there is one, because like you said, people may overdraft Travis Hunter in home leagues where they're too excited. I think
he's more likely to be overtaken than undertaken.
Right, but looking at where
Undertaker.
Wait, what'd you say? The Undertaker?
Oh no! Fucking goddamn it!
That's the grave for anybody that doesn't draft Travis Hunter this year. As of right now, consensus wide receiver 32. So going as like a back end wide receiver 3. I am going to happily leverage people's concern about how much he's going to play in order to get a guy who may be physically and as far as coordination and athleticism at the position, a top 3 talent as a wide receiver in the NFL. This is a guy that has been compared with how he moves to Justin Jefferson. This is a guy who's been talked about as having the best hand-eye coordination of any football prospect in years. And so I will take the discount about the uncertainty with him and bet on the talent winning out, even if he plays 60% of snaps, because those 60% of snaps are going to be tailored around him. That's not to say he's going to be targeted on every single one of those, but that is to say when he's on the field, they're going to make the most of it. Yes, absolutely. Some of those times will be ceded to Brian Thomas Jr. Some of the times he may just be opening up the field for BTJ. But Travis Hunter, when it comes to uncertain situations like this, falling back on the fact that he's just really fucking good, I think, and has a coach that is known for being able to get his best players the ball. And when the other receivers behind him are Diami Brown and Parker Washington, I'll take the guy that's been comped to Justin Jefferson, even though he's going to play some defense. Now, the downside case here is if he only ends up playing about 40% of the snaps on offense. I think even if every touch was schemed to him on those 40%, that might be tough to return value. But Pat, this screen, you know what the comparison was for me with this as far as fantasy goes? When in fantasy baseball 2 years ago, I got Shohei Ohtani at the 10th overall pick or whatever it was because he was a DH only. There was something that was scaring people because they were like, oh, well, I'm not getting the pitching numbers from him anymore. And, there's just this uncertainty about him. Forgetting the fact that he's a fucking alien and that as a DH, he's going to more than produce for you offensively. Oh. Different situation.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm ready to compare Travis Hunter to...
Oh, I am. Okay, I am. He's already been compared to Shohei Ohtani.
Well, the thing is, it's more impressive to be a two-way player in football. But like Shohei Ohtani is like an insane talent. Like
so is Travis Hunter.
Literally Babe Ruth. We're talking Shohei Ohtani is Babe Ruth.
People are just scared to put Travis Hunter in that combo yet because he hasn't played an NFL snap, and I get it. But this is a different level. Everywhere you look, every scout, everybody, different type of player, and I think you need to be ready to take advantage when you get an alien like this in the league because what you're inclined to do, what most people are inclined to do is try to think of him in terms of everyone we've already seen in the NFL. Who's he going to be most like? What is this going to seem like? He's totally different, Pat. Like, this is a different player that's coming into the NFL. This is a guy with a different type of skill set than we've seen.
That's true. We've
maybe
never seen
ever.
Anybody like this. Yeah.
And so that's why I'm willing to say that he's going to be an exception this year. And even though he's going to play some defense, I think he's going to be more than good enough on offense. And I'm just more than willing to take advantage of people's hesitance toward him. And maybe they'll be right, but I'm willing to bet on the talent here, and I think it's gonna work out. So draft Travis Hunter is my message. Pat's message is don't.
And we're running. I didn't say don't.
No, you said don't. You said I hate him. You said he's the worst player in football.
I hate him so much. I want him. I want to. But we're running out of time here. But I like Brenton Strange a lot. Again, I think it's just going that low at tight end. You don't necessarily need it, but he was really solid last year when Evan Engram wasn't playing, and you can say, oh, well, that was the last regime. This is Liam Cohen now. Liam Cohen used Cade Otton a lot in Tampa Bay, even when guys like Godwin and Mike Evans were healthy. So there's all reason to believe a tight end will still be utilized here. And again, going at 20, he may not be a top 2 guy potentially in that offense, but going at 22, that's okay. That's okay to have that low a value. I certainly think he's going to be a guy that's on the streaming radar on a pretty regular basis, at the least here. And going at tight end 22, if you really punt the position, again, I think I'm not going to say it yet because we haven't gone through every division in football. He might be my favorite value pick out of literally any player right now.
I think that's fair. I do like me some Brenton Strange. All right, folks, that will do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. Join us again here, 7:30 Eastern Time. Next week, we'll figure out what division we're talking about. But
we're halfway home.
Right now, we are halfway home. The message right now is draft Travis Hunter and also draft Bay Show. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next week.
Sucky on your Bucky. Bye-bye.
All right, and of course we will talk to the general chat now. We got a bunch of messages here.
I'm laying down now.
That's fine. Mostly from Lucian. Lucian donated like 7 times. $2 said favorite rookie on a Florida team. Bay Shelton. Another $2 said, could we use tight end? Could we see a tight end Catraz draft in the future? So I guess we're just drafting the worst tight ends in fantasy. Kyle Pitts, easy 101. So maybe. Puka Glazer with $2. Thank you. Said Puka Offensive Player of the Year 2025.
I can't wait to talk about Puka, man.
Let's just next week, Pat. NFC West. Let's run it.
All right, there it is. Next week. All right, you heard it here, folks.
Jake with $2 said team offered you a first for Brendan Schooler. Said grade trade. No, I'm not accepting a first round pick for Brendan Schooler. He is my favorite player ever. So absolutely not. Lucia with another 5 said A-Rod likely to be retired after the season per himself. Also, Bay Shelton. Absolutely. Yeah, I guess we didn't talk about Rodgers. Because I just don't fucking care.
I don't care.
This should be his last season, and fuck off, finally, please. Lucia with another 2 said Danny Dimes is currently winning QB1. I know, we talked about that.
Yep.
And then Lucian with another 5 said joining Herbo as sidekick to If Man is Trevor Lawrence as the hypothetical boy. Yeah,
right?
kind of.
And I think this is it, though. I think this is truly it for him. Either he won't be an If Man because he'll establish himself, or he'll be officially off the If Man radar.
Yeah. Agree. All right, if anybody has more questions for the general chat now that we've gone through our dono questions, feel free to pipe them in there about anything, anyone, football, whatever the hell. Kingdon, though, the $2 dono real quick, said, should I prioritize running back or wide receiver in round one?
Depends where you're picking, honestly.
Neither. I mean, I think there's merit to either. It's just what players you like more. Positionally,
This is a loaded first round, in my opinion. I think there are, 6+ great running backs and wide receivers going in round one. I think it gets to the point where you could probably get a really good player, like a first round level talent, as late as middle of round two, quite frankly.
Yeah. Let's see. Bailey said, what would you rather place $5 on? Baker Mayfield leading in pass yards or Ashton Genty leading in rush yards?
Genty. Yeah, not bias aside, Genty.
Yeah,
I
Baker.
think there's a genuine chance that happens.
I mean, Baker, look, am I overly concerned about them losing Cohen? Not really. I think they've established enough there with, the system they've got in place that they'll be fine. Baker was 400 yards off of the passing leaders last year. I think it would be hard pressed for him to beat Burrow, assuming Burrow's healthy. Burrow just kind of feels like a lock to me there, but yeah, I'd go with Genty there for sure. Let's see. Could we talk about the NFC South next? We did. Check out our last episode. I think our most recent episode before.
Yeah, we just vomited
South.
for 90 minutes.
Yep, we just vomited the whole time. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, I'm not even looking. I'm not doing my job very well.
No, you're fine. Let's see. Delusional Giants fan said, when do you draft Genty this year? Put it this way. I have the 6th overall pick in our draft, and I am basically set on taking him if he's there.
It was at the point where I was like, everyone's kind of under the assumption that I still am going to take him at 3. I don't think I can do it just because of how good these players are at the top and how much I like them. But the fact that it's even being thought about genuinely just goes to show. Take him as early as you'd like to, quite frankly.
Yeah. User said Bijan will finish as the number 1 running back. Probably.
I like him. I'd take him before Saquon if I have the choice.
Lucian said, would you rather have Baker, Geno, or Darnold for fantasy?
Baker, not close.
Baker, but closer than I'll give it credit for. I think Geno's going to have a good year, but it's Baker.
Well,
of
course, because the Raiders
Baker.
are going to win the AFC West, but that's beside the point.
No, I do think they'll be. I do think they'll be good, but no. Let's see.
I don't. I don't.
No, sorry. Did I say close? I meant good. I think they'll be good. They're not going to be close to.
No, you said you think they'll be good. I don't.
Oh, I think. I guess no. I think the offense will be good. Sorry.
I can't wait to get to that one. Well, that'll be the week after then. If we're doing the NFC
True.
West next week, then it'll be AFC West. Oh, there you go.
True.
Mark
Let's
your calendars,
see.
boys and girls.
Gamerling said, "Who do you think has the best chance to win MVP this year?"
Joe Burrow.
Will it be? Are the Bengals going to be good enough for that? Will you think maybe he gets?
I feel like all they really have to do is make the playoffs.
Yeah, I guess he could get a pity MVP because he hasn't gotten one yet. Because we've kind of entered this era of whose turn is it? Of whose turn it is to win MVP. Like this past year, just felt like it was Josh Allen's turn and he got it. I would say if you want an option beyond him and beyond somebody that's won it already, Jaden Daniels. I think there's a possibility.
Oh, sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I'll go with that. Let's do 2 more questions here. Who will have the best rookie running back season besides Genty?
See, I want to say Marion Hampton, but I think Najee Harris will eat into that enough. I think R.J. Harvey would have been a good answer, but now you bring in J.K. Dobbins, who I think will eat into that enough.
I'm gonna. Oh God.
I might go with your boy in New England, whose name I'm forgetting.
Travion Henderson.
Yes, yeah. Travion Henderson. Thank you.
I could see it.
Wait, what about Bayshore too?
Gun to my head, I'll go Caleb Johnson. But it's close. It's definitely. I think all those guys are kind of on the second tier, just all mashed together. Lily just popped in and said, still planning on the bench mob / brand coverage.
Listen to the beginning of the episode,
yes.
Lily. Yep.
Yes, go back to the beginning of the show. We detailed all about how we're going to do that. Long story short, Vampire League, 9 people we're going to pick for it, and email benchwarmerbrandpod@gmail.com saying why you want to be in it, favorite bit from the show, whatever it is, just generally.
Or DM me on Instagram.
Or
I've been getting
DM
some
at
DMs here.
PJ
I'm a lonely
Gustafson on
guy,
Instagram.
you know?
I got 3 emails to that email throughout the show. So
I've gotten 6 DMs. Yeah.
Perfect. And let's see here. Ryan said we get the Patriots as the very last team to go over, saving the best for last. Facts. Very true.
Yeah, that's fine, I guess. Yeah, let's roll with that.
All right, we'll do. This will be the last one. Eliza says, "What player that was good last year do you think will take a step back?"
Ooh, good question.
All right, let me look at the rankings here because the rankings are going to dictate some of this. Good last year, step back this year. I mean,
yeah,
I'll go with
a hard time.
I'll go with the easy one. I'll go with Saquon. He's still going to be really really good.
Yeah,
But-
I guess that's kind of
Like, look, dominant,
Just
clear
objectively.
RB1 last year. Wouldn't be surprised if he finished as RB6, 7 this year, just due to general variance, due to wear and tear. Just hard for a guy historically to put up back-to-back seasons like that. So
I've had a lot of L's on this show, but my biggest L that I'll own because it's that bad was me saying like 2 weeks before the draft that Saquon was like my least favorite of the first round picks when we were asked about that. Holy L.
I don't think I was overly complimentary of him either, so don't worry.
I didn't dislike him either, but yeah, it's still just monumental L.
Exactly. All right, folks, that will actually do it for the show. Again, back with, as we just decided, the NFC West next week.
Nope.
So thank you for tuning in, for laying down.
My camera fell, so you get nothing.
For the sleepy Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. I'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Oh, look at that.